Is it Twitch or Facebook? Nice. I might actually grab my phone and check it out.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Blast Away the Game Review. I am your host, Dustin Murphy. I have a special guest today. I have Frederik Schreiber of 3D Realms and Slipgate Studios. We're going to be talking about Iron Maiden, Bombshell, the character of Shelly Harrison, and the evolution of them going back to Build Engine in their brand new and upcoming title, Iron Maiden, which is set to release on multiple platforms next year. Fred, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. Just everyone is doing great when the kids are sleeping, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's if it's not kids, animals, anything that can get in the way or
Exactly.
cause a ruckus.
Like finally, I have a few hours of me time before the kid wakes up again.
Yeah, that's definitely. I know when we were getting ready for the interview, that was definitely a big thing, was making sure the kiddo was laid down, because I know it's pretty late there in Europe.
It's right now it's 9:40, 9:43
Okay, so
p.m.
it's not too bad in the evening. You're kicking off
It's
your
not too
weekend.
bad.
So everybody that is tuning in, I do want to give you a huge thank you. I know some of you are from the 3D Realms Discord community. Others are tuning in just through Facebook Live alone. So thank you for tuning in today. Now, to kick things started, Fred, how about you tell us a little bit about what you do at 3D Realms and Slipgate?
Sure. So the right place to start is probably Slipgate. We originally started back in 2010 under the name Interceptor Entertainment, and I think some of those viewing probably remember Interceptor and our early beginnings as the studio or the group of fans and modders who were working on this project called Duke Nukem Reloaded, which was an officially sanctioned project from Gearbox Software, and that project kind of spawned the studio. So basically, pretty short story. We did this project in a duration of 6 months, and unfortunately, around the time when we were ready to kind of open up a small little multiplayer alpha beta thing, the project was quietly shut down. And at that point, we were approached by Apogee, and Apogee software is not Apogee software. It might sound weird. 3D Realms is still legally called Apogee software, but back in 2009, 3D Realms licensed the name Apogee and the logo to a former employee called Terry Nagy, who also licensed the Rise of the Triad IP, and he contacted us and asked us, "Hey, since you guys are no longer doing Duke Nukem Reloaded because of a dispute with Gearbox, would you like to make a Rise of the Triad reboot?" And we said, "Hell yeah, that would be super cool." So we had one of the fans of Duke Reloaded invest in us, a guy called Dave Oshry, and then
we all know Oshry. Anybody that knows
yeah.
gaming knows Oshry.
Exactly. That's how he got his start as well. He was actually we had like this hall of pledgers. This was before Kickstarter and before anything. So the only way you could even run a project like Duke Reloaded was through donations, and he was the top donator. And he kept being the top donator. He always wanted to be number one on this donating list. So he was the one who contacted us, and he was like, "Hey, why the fuck can't you do Duke Nukem Reloaded?" And I was like, "Hey, can you sign an NDA and then I can tell you all about it?" And then he asked us, "Hey, do you have anything else?" Well, we do actually have this offer from Apogee, but they also don't have any money. Well, I have money. How much do you guys need? It's like, well, let me sit down with my guys and we'll put together a plan for this Rise of the Triad reboot, and I'll get back to you. And then he ended up investing in the project, and then over the duration of the next 18 months, we basically developed Rise of the Triad and released it actually on my daughter's birthday in 2013, July 30th.
Oh, nice. Very nice. So that definitely a nice little surprise, celebrate her birth, and your game definitely kicks off and does its thing. I know it's been very well received. All the reboots have been, and there's been a lot of requests for even more classic titles to get a little bit of a reboot of their own.
Yeah, it's fun because it's always been kind of our thing in some way. You know, Duke Nukem Reloaded was meant to be a Duke Nukem 3D reboot, remake, or remastering, and Rise of the Triad was also a reboot of Rise of the Triad, and then after Rise of the Triad, we actually got back and started working with the actual Apogee slash 3D Realms, and they gave us a license to do a Duke Nukem game. Finally, we could do an official licensed Duke Nukem game. And at this point, since we've had some disputes with Gearbox previously, we wanted to make sure that this license was in fact a true license, that we actually have an approved license to make this game. So we had a legal opinion from I think 3 different law firms, and we got all the paperwork in place that said yes, you can actually make this one Duke Nukem game. There's a carve out that allows 3D Realms and the sale of the Duke Nukem IP to outsource one more Duke Nukem game.
Because there was definitely plans for more Duke Nukem.
Exactly. So basically, the way it worked was when 3D Realms sold the IP to Gearbox Software, there's a range of already in development or in the planning stages Duke Nukem games, and 3D Realms retain the rights to finish those games, even if they're only in conceptual stage. And there were 2 games on that list. One was a game that Apogee was developing, called Duke Nukem Critical Mass, which came out after the sale because the game was in development when the Duke Nukem IP was sold to Gearbox.
Okay.
It was a terrible game, but it did come out for the Nintendo DS. And then another game was a game called Duke Nukem Mass Destruction / Survivor, or codename Survivor. And that game was only in early concept stage. It was going to be a top-down shooter, and yeah, so that was the game we were hired to do. We spent some of the money we made from Rise of the Triad, and then we got an investor on board. This was a much bigger project than Rise of the Triad. And of course, we worked on this new official Duke Nukem game for 6 months until we were ready to announce it, and then we got sued. And we didn't quite understand why, because in cases like these, you get sued, and all you want to do is talk to the other party and ask them, hey, why are you doing this? We have the right to do this. But you can't do that. You can't do that until you reach mediation, which at this point was like a year later.
Oh, so mediation. So there was a lot more to the story than a lot of us media have been told.
It should happen obviously in the beginning. Like, okay, let's sit down together and figure out what the hell is wrong and make sure that everyone is on the same page. But that didn't happen until a year later, which means that we had to spend a year, just pouring in money to this lawsuit until we finally got to mediation. And obviously, during mediation, we ended up agreeing on what we ended up agreeing with. But the issue here was when the actual lawsuit started, we had to put the whole project on hold, because we can't, let's say a year after the game is done, but we can't release it because there's been no conclusion on the suit. So at this point, the only thing we could do was to basically put this game on hold, salvage whatever we had made already, and try and see if we could turn it into something else. It's a terrible thing, but the other alternative was to completely cancel it and then, shut down the studio. Like, what other choice do we have? We have to make something out of it.
Which is unfortunately we see quite often in the games industry, and it's a very unfortunate thing that it does happen. And
the developer, often always is to blame, and understandably, you are in a situation where you basically have no choice. You have a group of investors that expect a product. They don't really care that much about what the product is. They just care about, hey, you promised in Q1 2016 there's going to be a product. We don't care what it is, but you have to start making money at that point. So the only choice you have is, okay, we have to make the best out of the situation. And we could have taken a bet. We could have said, okay, let's just continue, and then let's hope that we win or we can survive until we end up in court, and then we'll release this game. But that's also a foolish tactic, because you could drag this thing out forever until, because we're a very, very small studio at this point. We don't have much money. We can barely survive through this thing. So you can drag this out until we're sucked dry, and then we're closing doors. Then everyone loses, right? But yeah. So basically, what happened is that we did Bombshell, and we did the absolute best we could do. And we knew when we released Bombshell, there was a lot of work still left there. But we also knew that, we're releasing a game. At least you can start it, you can finish it. It works. It's not as bug-filled as most Bethesda games. It's still a full experience. But
it still had a few bugs, but they weren't one of those they're going to hinder the actual enjoyment or the story itself.
Yeah.
Some of them were actually rather humorous. You'd have guys spinning in circles. You would have, Shelly would have a one-line quip that would sometimes, go on repeat here and there. But it was nothing, on the magnitude of, say, the Bethesda Markarth bug, where it halted people from progressing altogether. I mean,
exactly. And I think a lot of these, a lot of the issues with Bombshell also stems from the fact that we simply didn't have enough time to properly, for instance, in terms of the dialogue. The dialogue is very Duke Nukem inspired. You can hear in her one-liners and so on in Bombshell that many of these are clearly lines that would work in some way for a guy like Duke, but not for a guy like Bombshell. She kind of became, Shelly Nukem, and there's a lot of things throughout the entire game that should have been completely redone from scratch, also in terms of tone, because tonally, it is a Duke Nukem game, and Iron Maiden is not tonally a Duke Nukem game. Iron Maiden is tonally a Bombshell game, as it should be, because it's a game with Shelly Harrison, because Iron Maiden was created as a Bombshell game first and foremost. Bombshell was created as a Duke Nukem game and then turned into a Bombshell game, and that's where the huge mistake is. Since the release of Bombshell, and it didn't do well commercially, but we still managed to get through it, and we're working on this definitive edition of Bombshell, which we've been working on for on and off for almost 2 years now, and it changes a lot of the things that we wanted to do in the beginning. It changes the tone of a lot of things in the game. It changes a lot of the RPG-ish elements to be much more clear in terms of what they actually are. Like, the game is not an RPG. It's a twin-stick shooter with very light RPG elements, but the way the product was positioned was as this sci-fi Diablo-esque game, which it's not. And obviously, if you expect that, you're gonna get hugely disappointed. If you expect the twin-stick shooter, you're gonna get pleasantly surprised, because it is a very high-quality, big-budget twin-stick shooter. You rarely see those. So basically, we did Bombshell. Bombshell didn't do well for us, but we did manage to start our next project, which got some government grants, which was Rad Rogers. It did pretty well. It was also sold to THQ, and then right after that, we shut down and closed Interceptor. A few months later, we started up fresh again, the same team. We bought back all the old assets, and we started under a new name called Slipgate Studios. At this point, we also owned part of 3 Realms, and then, from there we have risen from the dead, as you can say.
It's definitely, it's definitely noticeable that, in a lot of ways, to fans of all things retro, we're talking the 90s era retro, there's been a lot of love in the recent years from developers and publishers alike. You're seeing a lot of classic titles come back. You're seeing Resident Evil come back. Duke Nukem got the Megaton edition not long ago from Gearbox. You're seeing a lot of that type stuff come out of the woodworks. With that approach, we talked about Bombshell. I've played Bombshell, loved Bombshell actually, and we reviewed it for you all at one point. Now, with
you guys were actually pretty nice to us. I
yeah, you
remember.
guys, we had a lot of fun with it, and the interesting part was bugs aside, it was definitely something you could tell was not something you had done before. It was definitely a noticeable outside the comfort zone. But what's interesting is the fan reception versus the media reception. What is very, 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 it's almost two completely different
Yeah.
stories. You have those diehards who absolutely loved it. They appraised it for being as unique as it is, and then those who absolutely just did not care for it altogether. Now, with having rebooted, if in a way, would you consider moving from Interceptor to Slipgate? Would you consider this kind of a reboot of sorts in your own, or would it be more of a continuation of what wasn't finished?
I think it's a little bit of both. So beside, like, the whole reason for starting up Slipgate was after we closed down. We at least me personally needed a few months to kind of realign what is it we really want as a studio. We also had a lot of obligations as we were majority owner of 3D Realms, and at that point, 3D Realms was almost exclusively run by me.
Yeah.
And still is today, alongside now a big crew of amazing people that we've gotten together. And so at that point, we kind of had to try and narrow our focus. What is it exactly we want to do? And it all comes down to what is it that we do best. And that comes back to Duke Nukem Reloaded, Rise of the Triad. We are really, really well-versed in first-person shooters, especially what people nowadays call the retro style, but we would probably call it classic first-person shooters. That's how we started, that's how we got our success, and that is what we've always been good at. Bombshell was kind of an experiment to try and do something completely different, or Duke Nukem Mass Destruction was an experiment. And and the path going forward with the reboot of Interceptor and the reboot of 3D Realms is definitely going down that path of what all of us, I think pretty much everyone at the studio, everyone at Voidpoint, everyone who's working now on our other unannounced shooter, are all hardcore classic first-person shooter fans. And the funny thing is, many of us know each other from when we were kids. Like, for instance, Terminex, Richard, he's been part of this community, the Duke Nukem Forever community, back on the 3D Realms forum and on Duke 4net since the late 90s. And it's funny that you've been part of these forums and you've been following topics and threads with all these people throughout decades, and now we're all grown up and now we're actually doing this for a living. And when we rebooted 3D Realms and Slipgate, we knew that this was our path, because this is what we know best. And before at Interceptor, we kind of had this idea that every game we do, after Rise of the Triad and so on, we wanted to outdo ourselves. We wanted to do something new and innovative. I think most game studios do that and have that passion and that motivation to always outdo themselves with new and innovative products. And right now, we're kind of doing the reverse. We are instead trying to make games that we just wish we had when we were kids, without thinking about how can we make something innovative or revolutionary, brand new. We just want to make something old, something old and really good, and and really embracing it fully. Because I think a lot of people making, like, it's a bit of a popular thing right now to make retro style shooters. A few years ago, you had to make retro style platformers. It had to be 8-bit, 16-bit, pixel art retro style games, but now it's kind of the same thing going on with first-person shooters, and a lot of those games are great, and a lot of them are not. And those that are not, are games that are solely picking this path because of the visual aesthetics, and they don't quite understand what actually made those games great. What Voidpoint did with Iron Maiden was not, making a build engine shooter. It's the most difficult possible path they could ever have picked, and that's not what made Iron Maiden great. That it has the visual aesthetics of a build engine game. What makes Iron Maiden great is it's a fucking fantastic first-person shooter, and it's built on the foundation that was created back in the early 90s with Duke Nukem 3D, with Shadow Warrior, to some degree Quake, and so on. And that formula is what makes the game great. Has nothing to do with the graphics, has nothing to do with the sounds. All of those, that's icing on the cake, all of that stuff. That's the right approach to do retro-style first-person shooters. And I feel like a game like Medieval Dusk does that well. They understand that it's the actual core gameplay and the mechanics of the classic first-person shooters that were great. Let's make a great game based on those mechanics, and then pick a visual style that is also somewhat interesting. And since our game is meant to feel like a game from the Duke Nukem 3D era, making it in the build engine was the most natural thing.
Oh yeah,
obviously.
The build engine has been around since, man, forever. I'm an 80s kid, and I remember I was probably, I would say 10, 11 when my dad finally let my brother and I sit down and play Duke Nukem. I mean,
yeah.
And it's one of those, it's real interesting to see how retro, the whole, we have this retro, sorry, Richard's actually been giving some great feedback. He's actually given some awesome feedback.
You have some multitasking there to do.
Oh yeah, I'm used to it. This is the fun part about, let alone do I stream, being a journalist, just doing it all. You get some insider info. So
Are you still working with your dad?
Huh? Yeah, my dad actually, he still helps me run Blast Away the Game Review. He, aside from running Blast Away the Game Review, he works a day job. This is my full time. I stream. I think I bugged the door. I actually think I bugged the game. I may actually have to use the clip glitch. I've had a few small bugs here and there. I actually had one where I had to mute my audio. But if I remember right, nope, I can't jump out through the burning building. And so... But, the interesting thing is with the whole retro era coming back, there's a lot of interesting concepts. And, one of the big things is, Richard was telling me about the Duke Nukem reference in this.
Yeah.
But the big thing is with going back to the retro era is you don't have just the modern, your modern gamers, your 30, 40, 50-year-olds playing it. You also have an entire new generation looking at these games going, oh my god, this game looks horrible. But once they finally get into the meat of things, they're sitting here going, oh my god, why didn't I play this before, 10 years later? Now, Duke Nukem, a lot of people know 3D Realms for Duke Nukem being the iconic 3D Realms character. He was a major part of you guys for a long time. What's it been like trying to fill that gap with Shelly? Has it been something that's been highly positively looked at, or is it kind of something you're trying to still have fans associate with her?
Well, I think the right path when we kind of started fresh with 3D Realms was to not try and live up to the legacy of Duke Nukem. I think a big mistake. I think anyone does who are taking over an IP or studio or something they love and have to succeed it, is that they're trying to make something that can outdo it. That's the whole reason Duke Forever turned out the way it did. They constantly wanted to outdo themselves and everyone else, and by trying to do that over and over again, at some point you run out of money. And And I think if we had chosen that approach, we would have failed miserably. Because that's not our point. Our goal is not to try and outdo and live up to the legacy of Studio in 3D. Our goal is to make the best possible games we can while staying true to ourselves and not giving a thought to Duke 3D. Because if we give a thought to our past, people remember us from Duke 3D, Max Payne, Shadow Warrior, Wolfenstein 3D, Prey, a ton of legendary games created in collaboration with legendary studios. If we always try to up the ante in terms, okay, now we have to make something even better than that, and even better than that, we would fail every single time. So we're kind of going back to basics, and that first step was Iron Maiden. Before I came back onto 3D Realms to kind of run it full time, there was another strategy implemented by another employee, and that was to get as many games under the wings of 3D Realms as possible. Tons of different types of indie games and so on. It's a strategy I understand from a business development point of view, but it's a plan I largely disagreed with. The main reason is that 3D Realms is not a standard shareholder company where you have to release 10 games this year and 15 next year and 20 the year after, and you have to reach at least break even X2 on every project and so on. 3D Realms has so much history that it requires a completely different path. And so the first thing when I got back on was to basically get not rid of, but get the current games we had in our pipeline with external studios released, and that's it. And then we start from scratch, and that scratch was Iron Maiden. So the very first thing we did was, okay, let's lay back for a bit and lay low and figure out what do we want to do next and how do we want to approach Iron Maiden. Because Iron Maiden and the unannounced game we have after that is our path forward, and it's a path that basically continues. We continue the path that 3D Realms laid out in the mid-90s. So we're back. If you imagine 3D Realms right after Duke 3D and Shadow Warrior, what would be the next thing? Imagine that we never, we never found Remedy. We never did Max Payne. We never did Duke Nukem Forever. We just decided, hey, let's go on to the next thing. Prey was never a thing. Okay, what would be the next thing to do? And back then, it would probably be we did Shadow Warrior. Let's do Bombshell, because Lo Wang was a new character. Bombshell was also a character that was kind of written up back in '96.
Yeah, I was going to say, Shelly's been around for quite a while.
Yes.
I know a lot of people who... I know a lot of diehard fans are like, oh, here's the evolution of her over the years. And, there's actually quite a few good posts, even on the Steam pages and discussion pages, about Shelly and her evolution as a 3D Realms character.
And most don't know that evolution. We shared a long post with tons of concept art that was... a ton of those concept pieces were never released before. Some were. But she was actually originally drafted up as an original character with her own game in '96. Then in '98, she became part of the Duke Nukem Forever universe. But the cool thing is that the original game idea for Bombshell was her own game back in '96. They even registered the domain name bombshell.com, which they kept, and you wouldn't believe how many offers we got from porn sites still to buy bombshell.com. Like it's
insane. I can imagine
that we actually still have that domain, and it's something we use nowadays, but it was originally intended as its own game in '96. Then it became part of Duke Nukem Forever from '98 until I think 2008, 9-ish, she was still in Duke Forever, and then she was replaced with the Dylan character. But yeah, going back to the mid-90s, the new 3D Realms is kind of a continuation of that path. So we are basically embracing a lot of history and starting over from after Shadow Warrior. And after Shadow Warrior comes Iron Maiden. And we just announced voxels.
I do remember seeing something about that.
yeah, it's the next gen. We just figured out voxels, and now obviously the next thing in our own little timeline at 3D Realms is that how do you do true 3D? Because Iron Maiden is only 2.5D is the build engine. How do you do true 3D? We know John Carmack is over there at id Software. They're trying to do something with 3D. We want to do the same thing, and that's the next game we have in our pipeline. So I can at least announce that the next game from 3D Realms is going to be true 3D. We're still trying to figure out if it's going to be 3DFX or not. It's probably just going to be software rendered for now because 3D accelerators are still expensive. But
oh yeah,
that's where we are.
It's like, Richard was saying you guys actually had to do some changes to Bombshell regarding the glass in the office building for processing in the game. I remember, before the NDAs had lifted, Iron Maiden now, compared to then, is a much, much different title. It's, it has come a long ways. And I know Shelly herself has even evolved with it. Back in Bombshell, she's this hard-ass, very, very Doom, Quake, Unreal, esque character. Very, very...
Yeah.
She has no sense of chill. She is truly...
Yeah.
I'm here for business. It's like, she's here, she's tired, she's done with the Madam President. She is just tired of it all. And now you have this character who, in a lot of ways, is more of a reminiscent to all things 90s. She's very... She would fit very, very well in the 90s sci-fi genre. The whole future cyberpunk look. And that's kind of what it almost feels like she's inspired by, was a mix of cyberpunk and, retro shooter.
Well, Iron Maiden is a cyberpunk-themed game. Like, there's a lot of inspiration for, like, Blade Runner, for instance. And
yeah.
And the fun thing about going from Iron Maiden to Bombshell is that you see hints of the same character, and she has some signature weapons still, like the lover boy and the bowling bomb, but her change from the character she is in Iron Maiden to the character she becomes way later in Bombshell, that whole change, you don't know yet what happens in between, and how her journey is. All you know is that in Bombshell, she's just tired. She doesn't give a fuck anymore.
Oh yeah, that's definitely the vibe she gives off. Is the I'm done. Screw this shit. I'm just going to blow it all up.
Of course, and she rips heads off aliens and stuff. And in Iron Maiden, she's still part of the GDF. She's she hasn't lost her arm yet, and she's still evolving as a character.
Oh yeah, it's very noticeable because even in her portrait down on the bottom left, she's much younger. She, it seems a lot more novice into what she's doing later on, and the you go into retrospective behind who Shelly is. She's not, in a lot of ways, she is everything classic. When you think about classic games, she is the epitome of what made the 90s. She's your satire character. She's got the one-liners, she's got the look, and she's got the attitude. I mean, she is definitely one of those few female characters that could easily stand out as a very, very strong and very formidable character in the future.
Well, she's much more Ellen Ripley than Sarah Connor at this point. She is,
I was like, and at this point, she reminds me of Ellen Ripley. I was gonna go with that one.
But it's also a fun thing because when we're, when the Breakpoint guys and going from Iron Maiden to Bombshell, we have a rough outline of who she is as a character and the major events in her life, but the story is progressing as the game is being developed. It's not something that's set in stone. We have some we know that, all right, she has some of these weapons. She'll lose her arm at some point. We have Dr. Jadis Haskell, and he will, at some point become this crazy cyborg and go to space and ally with an alien race. We have the tentpoles. We know those things, but how her character evolves in between and how she turns out to the character she eventually becomes is still yet to be decided. That we're just going with the flow.
Yeah, it's definitely the interesting aspect of the whole thing is, the ebb and flow. It's noticeable that in the development cycle, it was one of those. How do we revisit, the things that we did in the past? And as you pointed out, over the years, that becomes more and more noticeable throughout the gameplay. It's more when you play Bombshell, it is noticeable that it was definitely an attempt to do something completely new, something conceivably different from the past. And then you move over to Iron Maiden, and it's one of those, oh, holy crap, we've done it. We found what we were trying to do.
It's actually fun because when we were working on Bombshell, we just before we started turning Duke Mass Destruction into this new IP Bombshell, we actually had some internal talks about what we wanted to do after Duke Nukem Mass Destruction, and at this point we had just taken over 3D Realms, so we also were looking into the back catalog, and we knew they had the Bombshell IP, so we thought about it would be cool to someday make a Bombshell game, and our original idea internally was that it would be cool if, because we had a lot of material Bombshell from back in the 90s, like going back to 96, and the whole thing kind of started with the idea that what if when we took over 3D Realms that we found this old build engine game called Bombshell that no one has found, and it was just too awesome to be released back then, and then they focused on other games, and it was kind of hidden in this treasure chest vault at the 3D Realms storage room, and that was kind of the thing that spawned the whole idea for Iron Maiden in the beginning. And then we, during the transition into Bombshell, we started talking about, okay, what do we want to do for this special edition? And at that point, the goal was never to make a fully fledged game. The goal was to make this tie-in prequel thing, and obviously it should be done in the build engine because this game takes place before Bombshell. So hey, let's make it, let's make it in the same timeline as Duke 3D and Shadow Warrior, and use the technology. So there's still a post on the Duke Nukem like Duke 4net forums where I wrote a post in there asking for build engine experts, especially the guys working on the Duke Nukem Forever 2013 mod for Duke 3D, to get in touch with me because we are going to make a game at 3D Realms and we could really use some build engine experts. Hint, hint.
For sure. So, now, I do want to, before we get too long, I know we got quite a few of your team members in here. I want to give a huge shout out for all of you tuning in. Developers and non, thank you so much for your support and joining us today. I do want to do this. I need to let my dog in really fast. She is outside. So we're going to take just like a quick 30-second. I just got to get up and let her in. She's a old girl. I forgot she was even outside. I got to let my leg wake up first. Now, the big thing is I know a lot of people are going to ask, before we get too much further, when and what platforms can they expect Iron Maiden on next year?
Oh, we already announced that. I think a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw the announcement.
We had a huge announcement. What, are you sleeping? Like the
yeah, I'm sleeping. Now, I know we can expect it early next year on a lot of platforms. I believe
we made an announcement. It's for PC, Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo Switch, and Linux, and that's basically everything.
Yeah.
Not the PS Vita. We had a lot of people asking for that. No, that's not going to happen.
Oh yeah, and I know Q2 for everything, pretty much, if I recall, everything, the Switch, PC, Mac, Linux, PS4, Xbox One, $20. What led to the decision on making it a $20 budget game? I know that's for a lot of people that's a huge thing.
We haven't announced any pricing.
Steve has it for 20 at the most. I was like, hey.
Well, there's the pricing, obviously, PC version, but
yeah.
But the problem is that when you do a physical console version, it's pretty much impossible to do it at $20.
Oh yeah.
Just the production of the cost of production, getting an actual disc printed and getting in store shelves worldwide, you're already around $20 per unit. So it won't be that. It also won't be $60 because it's not a $60 game. It's not, in terms of content, people would expect there's Red Dead Redemption 2. It's
Oh yeah, they're
100-hour, so it's going to be in between there somewhere. We haven't announced the actual price yet for the console version, but it will most likely be slightly more expensive. Obviously, get an actual disc there, and
oh yeah, and then you got that beautiful collector's edition you all announced.
Oh yeah, the 99
Yep.
sold out founder edition. We're actually we're going to announce an other box edition soon that doesn't have as many expensive items in it. What really crams up the price of the founders edition was the figurine. That is super expensive to make. It was way more expensive when they thought. So we're not gonna make any money if any at all on that. But it's a cool thing. The founders edition is pretty incredible. The figurines are super cool. But for the regular boxed edition, we're most likely gonna get rid of that and also in order to get the price down to something like $60, but still have some cool items in there.
Oh yeah, that'll definitely be something I know a lot of fans look forward to because they like to collect. I mean, look at how fast those collector's editions that they have finished. Anything
it
sell
sold
out
in 5 days or something. It sold out.
I was gonna say, I know when I looked at it, it was pretty quick. It wasn't one of those, oh hey, I will come back, in 2 weeks and get it. It was, oh hey, there is not a copy for me to obtain.
But we also had we had no clue that's the problem when you put something for this for sale. You can't just put it up and then see, okay, how many do we sell, and then start ordering.
Oh yeah,
we had so we actually produced all the copies first, and we produced a small amount. Let's say, okay, let's start with 500, see if we can actually sell them, and then we did. And then if we did sell them, then we would have to figure out, okay, what do we then want to do?
For sure, definitely for sure.
Go let the dog in.
Yeah, that's her barking. I'm sure you can hear her. She barks pretty loud. I'll be back in just 30 seconds. It's not even one of those,
Sure.
we're going to throw up and be right back seat. It's literally just across the room.
I'll answer some questions meanwhile. I'll see some here. Let's see. Mateo asks if any chance of showing that super old Bombshell game. Well,
Okay, now I have a very happy, very excited Pitbull. She is running around with a frisbee around the house. Now, I know we were talking about the pricing and that kind of stuff. If you need to take a quick break, we can take a quick break.
No worries. I was just responding to Mateo. He asked if there are any chance of showing that super old Bombshell game. Actually, we have a disc. We have a disc that says backup disc that says 1996 Bombshell on it, and it's an old MS-DOS thing that we haven't been able to get to work, and we haven't looked much into it since. But there is something there, and we don't know what it is. We don't know if it's some prototype side-scroller, if it's something build engine, what it is. We haven't actually really looked much into it other than, okay, this doesn't work in DOSBox, on to the next thing. Because when I looked through these, there were, I think, over 200 discs I had to look through, backup discs, and over 50 hard drives. So I was just quickly checking out, hey, does this work, does this not work, next, and then categorizing them.
So you guys got a lot in the a lot to put in the vault, to say the least.
I might actually get in touch with Richard and Evan and
blew myself up.
See if they can help me. See if we can get this Bombshell disc to run. It might also just be, some bullshit stuff that was never actually. But the disc does say 1996 Bombshell.
Now, one of the nice little things I think everybody will enjoy, including Mateo here, is you guys got some throwback cheat codes in the game. I noticed
everything is throwback in the game.
Oh yeah, I know there was guides somewhere. I can't remember where I saw it. You can actually find cheat codes. Like you just type it in, kind of like the old days of Duke Nukem and Doom. You know, kind of like the whole IDDF,
Yeah, absolutely.
KFA. Everybody knows that kind of stuff. Um, Mateo asks, "Did you check out the level of data corruption?"
I know it's not corrupted. It's so the thing is with many of these with some of these old games that were never really anything you could play yet. Some of them were actually not even compiled. So some of them are just old source code laying around that in order to even have an executable you can run, you need to actually compile it. But the old development environments are not even set up for that. Like, good luck trying to get that to run. It's the same thing with the old Duke Forever builds. Some of them we had to set up old development environments using extremely old and ancient versions of Visual Studio, even to get some of it to compile. Like, it's probably a case like that. And even if you did get something to compile, I don't think there's anything there. Officially, there was never a team Bombshell game. It was something that Scott Miller and maybe a few other guys were just playing around with. Tom Hall wrote documentation about what he Bombshell could be. It actually started out, we found some early fan fiction. Fan fiction by Tom Hall, where Bombshell was part of the GDI faction of Command and Conquer for some reason. Like
that would have been cool.
Yeah,
anybody that knows,
type character.
oh yeah, anybody that knows games like Command and Conquer, it's one of those days. You know, you sit there and go, man, I really miss those days, and that's one of the nice things about, you know, a lot of studios like 3D Realms is, hey, let's do what everybody else isn't doing. Let's go back to our roots.
Exactly.
It's like, you know,
we actually have some guys here in the chat that are from new 3D Realms team,
very nice.
old shooter.
Very, very nice. One thing is that's really interesting. I know I've been playing Iron Maiden in the background and doing a horrible while I'm at it. I do have it cranked up. I do have it cranked up. I hit a bug that I need to report it on the official, you know, the Discord, where you lose all your items loading in on the ladder. It's like, oh hey, I'm taking all your stuff away.
No, it's a feature. It's not a bug.
Yeah, a lot, but you know, you do get. It does give you a lot of that starting stuff right there in starting out. Now, I know a lot of people who aren't familiar with Bombshell. We have one regular that tunes in, quite frankly, in the chat, Dominic Lavelle. What's going to be the big thing drawing in a lot of people who didn't, or whether, I guess the better way to word this would be, how do you think it's going to be drawing in the more new age kids, you know, the kids who didn't grow up to the 90s shooters? What do you think is going to be the real big enticement for them to jump in?
So it's actually fun you mentioned at a game convention here in Denmark back in August. We had a booth for Bombshell, for Iron Maiden, and we had a lot of kids there. Like they were running Fortnite competitions next door and so on. So in between, you know, you had a ton of 8 to 10-year-old kids come into the convention part of the center, and then they would try out Iron Maiden. And first of all, they were playing it in a very different way. They were playing it like a competitive shooter, which was like super weird. It's a single-player game. You need to, you know, body hop and circle strafe around every single enemy. You know, but that's how they used to playing it as. You know, that's how they play other competitive shooters, I guess.
Oh, yeah, they're not used to the old school strafe shooters.
Exactly, and they missed. It was infuriating because they missed everything. Like every single nice little, you know, Easter egg or secret or all the amazing details the artists had put in all the levels. It just like ran right through them, ignoring everything. It was almost like speedrunning. But when we then asked them, hey, so what do you think about the game? And they thought, oh, this is amazing. I love these type of games. And we didn't immediately hear anything about the graphics. So I asked them about, hey, what do you think about the looks and so on? Oh, it looks amazing. And what we realized was that the 8, 10, 12-year-olds, they don't think that Iron Maiden looks old, because old for them is
Fortnite, stuff like that.
Well,
actually, Fortnite would be technically new for them.
Yeah, that's technically new, but something like Black Ops 2 and the first Destiny, like games that came out 3-4 years ago, those are old for them. So when they see a game like Iron Maiden, they don't think old, because they don't know it's old. They know it's a style, but they don't connect the art style in Iron Maiden to old. They just think, oh, it just looks different. And what's really cool is that when they look at a game like Iron Maiden, I ask them, what do you think, like, what's appealing with the visual style? Because they play the game and you could see they clearly played first-person shooters before. And when they look at a game like Iron Maiden, the visual style they see is an artistic visual style. Like, okay, someone actually drew this by hand. While when they play a game like Destiny or Call of Duty or Battlefield or something like that, they just think, oh, this is just all photographs because it's photorealistic. This is really funny, because if you know how long it takes a long time to make a sprite in Iron Maiden, a very long time. It's a very different approach than making a AAA weapon. But if you know how long it takes to make a AAA weapon, how many resources that are involved, going from the first concept to a fully functioning weapon in a game like Call of Duty, it's probably fucking $100,000 every time.
Oh yeah,
it's like insane. But they saw it in the opposite way. They saw a game like Iron Maiden, like, oh, this is a truly artistic game. You can really, because it all looks artistic. It looks like it's hand drawn, the pixels and everything. But they didn't know that pixels are old school. They just thought that it's just an art form.
They're not.
This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you get into folks our age groups. They're just like, oh, this is like what I grew up with. I love this. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
This is nostalgia. And you get into these, you do get some of the kids that are, oh, I want the best of the best. The graphics suck. I don't like it. And that's kind of the downer when you look at games like this. For a lot of us retro fans, this is eye candy. This is our childhood. We're reliving, in our 30s, 40s, 50s. And so for a lot of us, it's like, oh my god, I love this because of that.
See, that's the cool thing about young people nowadays, is that the main demographic for a game like Iron Maiden are still mid and we appreciate the game for another reason than the 8 to 12-year-olds do, but they still appreciate it just as much. So we're finally at a point where we have these games that we love them because we love them because they're true old school type games, and we have the kids love them because they're just great games. Which is fantastic.
It's definitely one of those, you look at a lot of stuff and you look at the market trend on gaming, and you're seeing a lot of developers going, hey, we don't want to be associated with Call of Duty. Hey, we don't want to be associated with Battlefield or any of these hyper realistic shooters. And it seems like the goofier it can get in a lot of ways, the less serious it takes itself, the more it is valued by the community. And that's
also the more timeless it is. Like, when you have a game, and that's also Fortnite is more popular than PUBG. It's timeless. A game like Fortnite will never look old. Yeah, show that to someone 10 years from now, and it looks like a Pixar movie. That's cool. If you show them a game like Call of Duty, they will see that, okay, this has not aged well. And that's the thing about stylized games in general. It's also the thing with pixel art games, and games like Iron Maiden. The visuals will not age, which is really cool. I have a timeless classic already, just in terms of the visuals. And if the gameplay itself is timeless as well, you're kind of outside of the competition with all the AAAs, which is a really good thing.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the things that kind of sticks out. You look at let's talk Rise of the Triad. That remaster was highly appraised by everyone. I know the first time I actually heard about it was I ran into you, Oshri, and Andrew Holschel. We were all at QuakeCon, and I ran into you guys for the very first time, and that's actually where I learned about your newer projects. At the time it was Bombshell and Rise of the Triad's reboot.
Yeah, and Rise of the Triad was... See, the approach we took with that game was that we wanted to make something that looked AAA, and the challenge nowadays is if you go back and play Rise of the Triad, it hasn't aged well in terms of its visuals. It's clearly Gears of War type Unreal Engine 3 game. You can see it's pre-PBR engine. It's using the same techniques, diffuse normal specular maps on everything. It just looks like Unreal Engine 3, and that era of games have not aged super well. Again, you can argue that for a game like Rise of the Triad, the visuals were not really that important anyways, because the gameplay still holds up. But looking in hindsight, if we did Rise of the Triad now, we would probably have taken a different approach. Maybe more of a sequel approach, original Rise of the Triad, 95, and then, okay, now we're gonna make a sequel, let's make it 97. It's, something like It Tech 2 or, Build Engine or whatever, just to have something that's slightly above the original, but still has a visual aesthetic that is old school, so it really fits with the gameplay.
That's definitely...
Again, kind of the same approach with Iron Maiden and Medieval.
Oh, I walked right into that rocket. That's the one thing I like about the mech is, Mateo's giving great advice, so is everybody in the chat, really. And this is one of those, if I was being super try-hard, I would have probably cleared this by now, but it's one of those, it's fun to mess around with. It's one of those, how many different ways can I try to beat this boss and not succeed, or how many ways can I do this and succeed? I've played this, gosh, I don't even know how many hours, 4 hours total on this campaign alone. Not this one, but my overall time with it. So I've spent a decent amount of time. Then with the PC sharing, I've spent even more time on the Blast Away the Game Reviews count. And the one thing that really sticks out, we're talking about the whole visual styles, and you look at games like, let's say, take Red Dead Redemption 1, and then you look at it today, and it's probably one of those you're sitting there going, and this was considered a graphically demanding game.
Again, that's from the same era as Rise of the Triad. Like that late 2000s, like generally late 2000s, late previous generation consoles, those games have not aged well at all. And it's really fun because in the new console generation, obviously we're all PC gamers, but the console generations are still kind of dictating the graphical leaps. And the big graphical leap with the current console generation is generally physically based rendering. All the engines that are used nowadays are physically based rendering, which means that even with the first batch of PS4 games and Xbox One games, you had such a massive leap in visuals that, like, the games that came out in 2014 for Xbox One and PS4 still look incredible today. Like game like Rise, Son of Rome, holy shit, that game today still...
Oh yeah.
It could come out today and would still look incredible. Even Killzone Shadowfall.
Oh yeah.
It's been what, 4 or 5 years? It's still...
Let's see, PS4 just turned 5, I believe, this week, or it's next week, so yeah.
Yeah.
Killzone definitely stands out. It's like, we're talking retro. I don't know if you remember it, but back in the day you had a game called One Whole Pint of Blood, or Blood One Whole Pint. And, you look at those games and you're sitting here going, oh my gosh, those games were in the 90s, but if you boot them up with mods like ZDoom, where you skip past the use of DOSBox, for example, it's just like, wow, this game actually really has held up, even though, it's what is it? I think back then, like, the max resolution was like 600p at most back in the 90s. Like, that was a good day.
480p, I think.
Yeah, that probably is it. I know it was, I remember, I think, what was it? The first time I got my hands on Duke Nukem. So we're going to do a little flashback here. I mean, this is a flashback for a lot of people out of the 90s, I can imagine. So my dad, I would say I was probably 8, 9. I was going through the whole Duke Nukem slide. I had just beat the Duke Nukem side scroller. Like, we're talking old Duke here.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people go, Duke Nukem had a side scroller? Yes, Duke Nukem had a side scroller, for those who don't know.
Actually, the first Duke Nukem side scroller, and especially came the best selling, like Duke 3D, Duke Nukem 2 was the best selling shareware game of '93, just until December 10th when Doom shareware was released, and then that kind of killed it. But yeah, like the Duke Nukem games, Duke Nukem 1 and 2 were massive hits at the time, like as big as they could be. The only problem is that you really hadn't had a huge, massive hit on PC yet. You didn't have anything even remotely close to something like Nintendo and Mario in terms of massive commercial hits until Doom, and then compared to Doom, nothing could even come close. Before then, yeah, Duke Nukem 1 and 2 were some of the best selling games ever on PC.
It's like, and you look back now and it's like, it's back to that statement I made where, you're seeing a lot of big hits coming back. Sega is seeing a lot of success with their retro collections. Id Software is seeing a lot of success with rebooting their retro games, but taking a very retro look with modern graphics. And, Iron Maiden's getting a lot of attention for being retro. I think one of the big things I saw was even as a journalist, and a streamer, I still follow other magazines. There's always a different perspective of read, there's a lot of different ways to look at everything. And Iron Maiden has received nothing but positive, and it goes back to that statement of, orange is the new black, and old is the new. That's the big thing when you look at a game like Iron Maiden, is a lot of people are appraising it for what it is. Let alone is it an artistic.
I think it's also pre Iron Maiden. You have two types of retro games. You have those that apply a retro aesthetic in order to appeal to an audience like us. Then you have those who decide to make a game using the old technology, but then it's an experiment to see, how is it to make a game using this technology, but the game never get any recognition because it's not actual good game designers making it. It's just someone, hey, let's try making an NES game on true hardware, and then it never. Well, Retro City Rampage was actually called Grand Theft Endo originally, and was an GTA clone on the original NES. But again, that turned into, a full game that didn't run on the NES. But I think Iron Maiden is probably one of the first attempts to combine both, making a really, really amazing first-person shooter.
This one's to you, Mateo.
Aesthetic that's retro, and then of course using the classic technology to a degree where the game is actually good. I think that's what really, that was really appealing, especially to the press as well.
The other thing that's go ahead. Sorry.
No worries.
So the other thing that really helps is while we're on this topic of the things that work, is Rad Rogers is another great example. You guys released it, and it's been nothing but high praises for Rad Rogers. It's been getting a lot of love.
Well, Rad Rogers actually it's both Iron Maiden and Rad Rogers started out as it usually starts out with, we meet up at my place and then we drink too much beer, and then I start talking about, I wish there was a game like this. And one of them was, the thing we discussed earlier about, I wish there were we could make like an old game using the build engine in the Bombshell universe and so on. Another one was I wish there was a sequel to Rough and Tumble on the Amiga. It's one of my favorite Amiga games. And both of these small sparks turned into full projects. First of all, Maiden, we found these amazing that
Bombshell, for some reason, is really cranked up. Give me 1 second to fix the audio on this one. I forgot that I am Bombshell because back, I would say about a year ago, my dad and I actually built a computer to share with the full intention of streaming, and I forgot that I hadn't set Bombshell up on this thing yet. So it's like, oh hey, Bombshell has not been set up at all. It is still very, just because of the fact I am streaming, I think I am going to run it on high rather than extreme. Let's crank her up to DX11. And you talk about these old games, you're sitting here going, wow, Bombshell, she's back with Iron Maiden, which is a 90s style retro shooter. You got Rad Rogers, who even with modernized graphics is a solid platformer. You come back to these, you come back to a lot of these older games, you're just like, man, with modernized graphics, they aged so well. It's that kind of mindset.
Well, if you look at Roger, it's also different. Like when you use the stylized aesthetic for a game like Fortnite, it's much more timeless than if you decide to go for more realistic AAA looks and for this game, we could have taken the same approach. Decided, okay, let's make a 3D platformer and make it pixel arty. But the problem there is there are hundreds of pixel art 2D platformers, and if you tried to make one that was authentic, no one would care or give a shit or even know, because all of them looks the same. It's different with first-person shooters. Now you see more and more coming, but we were early enough with Iron Maiden that people know that, okay, this is one of the true authentic retro style first-person shooters. If we did that with Rad Rogers, no one would care. So with that game, we decided, okay, let's go full in on trying to achieve this Pixar style look instead, and that worked out really well for that game. Obviously, for the budget we had, we had two options: either we choose an aesthetic that is relatively cheap to produce, and then we make a very long game, or we make a short, cheaper game, and then we make it as beautiful as we could ever dream of. And that's kind of the path we chose with Rad Rogers.
Oh yeah.
So it's a fun little game, and we're really, really happy. It turned out really well.
And that's one of those things, that really helps. I think in a lot of ways, the best way for me to put it is that's what really helps 3D Realms stand around. It's, not just stand around, stand out is what I meant to say. You guys are definitely always trying something new. It's one of those, you'd almost say, looking to the past while moving forward. What made these so great, and what can we do moving forward to make it even better? That mindset. And it definitely seems like that's something you all have been doing constantly, and it's worked very, very favorably for the studio.
Well, I think it's also, the fact that with both Rad Rogers and with Iron Maiden and with this new unannounced game, all three are games that we really, really want to play ourselves. And I think the second you start making games for yourself and not for a certain demographic or target audience, you will start making great games. Of course, it depends if you have good taste or not. If you have shitty taste, then obviously not. But that is also the approach that we decided to take going forward with 3D Realms and Slipgate. A game like Rad Rogers is a spiritual successor to Rough and Tumble, a game that we love at the studio. Iron Maiden is the spiritual successor to Duke 3D, Shadow Warrior, Blood. It's something we always wanted to see more of, and And our next game is the same for a range of other games we can't talk about yet.
Oh yeah, that's definitely one of those things. A lot of people get wrong. I think in development, it's I'm creating this game for the fans, and it's not. Oh, I'm creating this game because it's something I want to play. And that's where I think a lot of like a good example is. I'm going to do a AAA reference here. Is Assassin's Creed was a great example of that. It went from this, how can we make money, to how can we make a game we want to play. Doom took the same
get the feeling.
Oh yeah, it's a great feeling. It's like Bombshell.
I haven't played Assassin's Creed since like the first one, but I get the feeling from the reviews that the two ones have kind of turned into more RPGs games like Skyrim and The Witcher and like those type of games rather than what they were before.
Yeah, and they definitely
you really
did.
get the feeling that it's
and it works. I mean, that's one of those things. It's I tell people to this day. I have friends that go, "Oh, I didn't really care for Bombshell. It was definitely an interesting attempt to do something unique. It just wasn't for me." And I'm sitting here going, I must have a really bad taste in my mouth or taste in games or something, because I for one, loved Bombshell, for example. And I have friends who go, they just didn't care for it. I'm sitting here go, what was bad about that? Like, I actually need a honest reason behind this, because personally, I forgot how to use my grenades already in Bombshell. Oh, that's right, middle mouse.
Well, that's not. I also think it has a lot to do with expectations. I don't recall any journalist besides you that we actually met with multiple times and sat down with and took you through what Bombshell actually was. And I think if you come into Bombshell completely green when the game was released, let's say IGN, we got a 7.9 from one IGN site, I think IGN Spain, and then we got like 2 from another IGN, which was super weird, completely opposite. But if you come in completely green and you boot up the game and you expect it to be okay, this is gonna be Diablo in space. Yes, I totally dig it. Let's go. Then you're gonna get severely disappointed, and then you're gonna have nothing to, but bad things to say about it. Like the cringy dialogue and the B-movie references and all of that stuff doesn't really make the game good or bad. You fill all that stuff out. But if you cut it into the core, what is the actual game like to play? You expect one thing, but you get another, you're going to get severely disappointed. And I think 90% of the people playing Bombshell on release expected something else than what it was. I think you're one of the few, because you played it quite a few times before then, and you met with us quite a few times. You knew exactly what you were going in for, and then I think you have a different perspective. And that is a huge fault from our side, that we miscommunicated what this game was. From the very beginning.
It's like, my dad...
We were so...
Okay. It was all the reference. I'll go back to it here in a minute. It's a reference to the reviews.
I think PC Gamer in one of the previews said that it's like Diablo in space. And we kind of took that and ran with it, because we were so honored that, holy cow, someone is actually comparing our little game to Diablo in space. We gotta take that quote and run with it. But the fact is, it has nothing to do with Diablo in space. And yes, it's a good marketing tool to take a quote from a preview and use it like that. But if it doesn't actually represent what the game is, then you're gonna fail miserably. And that's unfortunately what ended up happening. Everyone thought this was going to be Diablo in space, and it's not. But if we told everyone that this is going to be like a Smash TV, or twin stick shooter, then you get a hell of a lot more twin stick shooter from this game than you do from most other games.
And that was the big thing. You go back to the reviews. I know we scored it at a 7 and 10. The biggest deal was my dad. He's more of a Diablo point and clicker, and he said, this in a way it's Diablo. And when I sat down, after talking to Becky, because I had met Becky at the time when she was with 3D Realms, and she was like, "Oh, you got to try this. if you like these kind of games, because she overheard my dad and I talking about Doom, Diablo, that kind of stuff, because we were at the BYOC checking out the BYOC for the first time ever. And I started, I went over there after running into her, and I started, watching it. It was right before I decided to give it a spin. And I'm like, dude, this isn't Diablo. Like, it has the Diablo aesthetic of the isometric gameplay, but I was like, man, this is like Duke Nukem top down. Like, that was the first thing that popped in my head, is Duke Nukem top down. And that's where I think Bombshell really stuck out. And it's like, with the chance with Iron Maiden, it's like, you still somewhat get that feel. Even though you're playing a first-person shooter, you still have that. This is still very, Bombshell at its core, just in a completely different approach. And, that's a big thing when you look at games like this, is how can we keep that and stay true to that character. And, when you play Iron Maiden, you're still getting Shelly the way she was, which is this, very sarcastic, very quippy character, but even her sense of the items she uses still remains at its core. So that's definitely something really interesting about it. Ooh, I hope my Discord's not messing up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Some reason my Discord quipped out for a sec. Oh,
no worries. I also think that if you look at a game like Iron Maiden, the second you see a trailer or screenshot of it, you're stuck with the thought that, okay, I know exactly what this game is. When you then start playing it, you get exactly what you expect. Everyone is thinking when they see a screenshot of Iron Maiden, wow, this is the spiritual successor to Duke 3D, Blood, Shadow Warrior, the type of games I grew up with. You start playing it, you realize this is exactly like that, but even better. Bam, yeah. It's a home run.
Oh yeah.
For a game like Bombshell, it's very different, because if you see trailers and screenshots from that, you're thinking, holy cow, this looks amazing. It looks like Diablo in space and sci-fi, and I'm gonna get this. And then you're not getting that. You're getting something very different. So even looking at the two different games without playing any of them, you think you're gonna get one thing, but for Bombshell you're getting something else. And I think for the new version, the definitive edition, that's something we definitely need to change, and we need to have a very, very clear strategy in terms of our positioning and messaging, making sure that for new customers they understand what Bombshell really is, so you're not getting disappointed.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that really stood out was, like the mixed message I was telling you about with Bombshell. It's like, oh, Diablo-esque space shooter. I liked the approach, and I even to this day I still talk about Bombshell because it's one of those. I like twin stick shooters. I'm a fan of twin stick shooters. It's like, hey, I really wish this game was on console. I was sitting there talking with one of the streamers for Blastaway. She does our Twitch streaming. Her name's Lana. I was telling her how I actually wish we had more of these type of games on consoles, because you don't see a lot of Twix. You have Nex Machina, you have game Alien Nation, those kind of games, but they're not one of those. Oh, how much of a story are they going to offer? It's you load into a single mission, beat it, you're done. You don't progressively continue on. Where Bombshell did that, but it was. I told my dad if I ever had to revisit a review of it, I was like, I'm totally going to put this. Get rid of the stigma that this is a Diablo style game. Don't do it. And he was like, "Oh, what's this Iron Maiden?" We went, "Well, that's Bombshell, version 1.0. Bombshell's 2.0."
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I had to describe it, because Shelly is still very much. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's an evolution of Shelly. You're seeing her go from the, you're seeing her go from Ellen Ripley to Sarah Connor, as we were saying earlier. And it's two very different versions, and the interesting thing is both of them work for her in their own rights. They both work very, very well for what the games are trying to portray. But I think it was one of those, a lot of people went in with that Diablo expectation, and it just was like, oh, well, this isn't what I expected. But it was one of those, hey, this is a twin stick action shooter that's driven by a narrative, and it's like, oh, hey, This has, the Rad Rogers platforming. This has the, this whole 90s top-down vibe. I can do this. And it's one of those, with the definitive edition idea, it's like, hey, take that approach and run with it. There's not a lot of games that market it like that. And, the evolution of 3D Realms has always been, in my eyes, what can we do but do it better out of what we've already done? And how can we continually evolve our approach to everything?
I think you're really going to enjoy our next first-person shooter, our unannounced Quake engine game.
Yeah, that was, I think, Mateo. It was one of the Leonardo. It was either Leonardo or Mateo. I'd have to read back. Was mentioning that you guys had a new one in the works. Now, the one thing I do, we were, evolutions, and I got off track of the interview notes. We were talking earlier about the evolution of Shelly and how she changed. What was, I want to touch on that real quick while it's still on the back of my head. What was the decision? It's like, oh, hey, we got Duke. What was the decision to go, hey, now we have our Duchess? What was the idea behind that? Was it just one of those, you liked Shelly and decided to run with it? Or was it more of, hey, we need a new figure. Rad's not exactly it. We have Shelly, so let's run with her. Was it that kind of thing, or was it just...
Well, Rad started development after Iron Maiden. So that came after. But in terms of Bombshell and Iron Maiden, it started with Bombshell, obviously, and when we went from Duke to Bombshell, it was simply a matter of, we want to make a new IP, but we wanted to make it female, Sarah Connor-ish, Terminator 2 style, and we thought, why not just use Bombshell? Like, we have the name, we own the IP. It's never been properly announced, or it's just a perfect match. Like, whatever we were thinking of doing in terms of the IP matched really well with what we already own. So we just did the Bombshell thing. It just made sense. It's like, let's say you start designing a game. Okay, I want this, big macho guy with sunglasses, smoking cigars, and he's an action hero. And we also own the Duke Nukem IP. Like, it's match made in heaven. And it was kind of the same deal with what we wanted to do with a new IP and then Bombshell. So we kind of approached Bombshell as a new IP because there's no lore or anything written around this character when we started.
And that's kind of the interesting thing, is it works, and it works very well, and it's being recognized for that. They're actually, it's like when I think 3D Realms, it's no longer I think Duke Nukem. It's, hey, the first thing that comes to mind is I think Shelly, Bombshell, Harrison, and Iron Maiden and Bombshell. So it works very well.
It's the new, it's the new 3D Realms trying to kind of make a name for ourselves, and we can't make a name for ourselves in AAA simply because we don't have tens of millions of dollars to use on every game we want to do. But also, as we talked about before, we wanted to go back to basics and start working our way up from 96, 97, as if the games we did after then never happened. Because if we go back to those types of games with that aesthetic and the old engines and so on, we can actually produce really good games with the budgets we have available.
Oh, I missed the jump. I'm in the second run in Bombshell. I just missed the jump on one of the platforms. But it works very, that's a good point, is, you guys are, and I have friends that are going to say, no, that's not right, but, when you look at 3D Realms, I tell a lot of people, think indie. They're not, you don't have the backing like, say, Blizzard, Activision, or Ubisoft's and their mini studios, and so it's like, it works very, very well with the approach that's been taken right now, and it's
and I think it's always been like that. Like 3D Realms has always been independent, and the games, the few times that 3D Realms have worked with huge publishers have been for strategic reasons. So, for instance, the first one, besides Duke 3D and GT Interactive, obviously you need a distributor that can take the game and bring it worldwide. After the shareware episode was an instant success, they realized, okay, we can't get this onto store shelves worldwide ourselves. So let's partner up with GT Interactive, get it out, foreign gen in Europe, GT in the rest of the world, and so on, blah, blah. But for the next huge game was 2001 with Max Payne. And with that, the game was funded by 3D Realms, developed by Remedy, and co-published by Take-Two. And that is, even at the time, a gigantic publisher. The first project 3D Realms was doing in collaboration with a huge publisher, besides Duke Forever, but Duke Forever was not out yet. And the reason for doing that at this point, even though you're self-funding the project, is that, yeah, you're indie, you're small, but you want this game on every single store shelf around the world on launch day for all the platforms. And that is just extremely hard to do. No matter how indie you want to be, you want the most amount of people to be able to get their hands on the game on launch day. And that's just not possible if you're indie. Well, it is possible, but you need to partner up with a big publisher. But 3D Realms have never been huge, and that's actually one of the problems with Duke Forever. The project simply outgrew the studio. Because at that point, when 3D Realms were doing like the last internal game done and released by 3D Realms was Shadow Warrior.
That was
think
quite a while ago.
97 was the last time 3D Realms internally developed and released their own game. Like 12 years later, 3D Realms fired the entire development staff, laid off everyone, and sold the Duke IP to Gearbox. Imagine 12 years without a single released game developed internally.
I couldn't imagine that. Even as a small news publisher, it goes in the same aspect. It's like, hey, how I sit here. There's days where it's, how do I continue to grow this and make this happen? And then there's days where it's just like, oh, how the hell did my stream hit 2,000, 3,000 views and continually do it?
Exactly. And the problem with 3D Realms back then was the game Duke Forever outgrew the studio, because you're no longer compete like with Shadow Warrior and Duke 3D. So you're competing in a world where Quake was done by like 8 people or something like that. And the same with Duke 3D. Like, games were done back then with very small teams with small budgets.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, the world is changing. You're going from a 15 to a 20 to a 25 to a 30-man team working on Duke Forever, while your competitors doing Halo 2 with 100 people at Bungie, and then you have Call of Duty 200 people, and all the competitors just grow and grow and grow. And with 3D Realms staying the same small size, trying to win over all these huge AAA studios, it's just a recipe for disaster. Because then you aren't as agile as you'd like to be. Every single time a new feature is introduced in another game and you want it in your own game, it's going to take twice as long to implement than if you had 100 people extra to help you do it. And the problem there is, even those studios with 100 people extra are actually inventing their own new mechanics while you're just playing catch-up.
Oh, yeah.
So it was doomed from the beginning, simply because the time when Duke Forever really started gaining traction was probably the worst possible times to release games, because every single game were light years ahead from the game that came out just before it in terms of technology. Things went so incredibly fast back then. If you look at Quake from Quake 2, you have 11 months between two games that looks a decade apart in terms of visuals. It's just absolutely insane. If you look at a game that's like 5 years old today, again, look at Rise Son of Rome, Xbox One launch title from 2014. You would not think that is a 4-year-old game. It could have come out today. But back then, you had 11 months between Quake and Quake 2, and you have a game that looks like it's a decade apart. You had a year between Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, and the graphical leap between Wolf 3D and Doom is unimaginable by today's standards. It would be going from Minecraft to Red Dead Redemption. Like,
oh yeah, it's when you look at games, it's crazy because with ray tracing, for example, Nvidia is definitely upping the game. They're playing a lot of, we're seeing major technological leaps, not just for gamers, but for developers, for entertainment of any sort. As an interactive media journalist, it's one of those, you notice these massive leaps going on. But I do have a question from a viewer for you. Magnus Fosdal asks, do you have any future cooperations with Gearbox on any Duke projects?
We actually do, but we can't talk about that yet. But there is something in the pipeline. It's kind of cool because it's the first time that we have, like, we're collaborating on something Duke Nukem related since like ever, like Duke Forever maybe.
Duke, dang, that's been what was it, Duke Forever? When that came out in 2005? Was it 2011? Yeah, June 10th. It's been, I didn't think of it. It doesn't feel like it's been 7 years for Duke Nukem.
Yeah, it's been 7 years, 7.5 years.
A lot of, when you look at Duke Forever, you look and compare it to games like Rage, Prey, stuff like that, and you're sitting here going, holy crap, that game still looks new. Like, it really does look like a modernized game.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's actually really cool to hear about that. One thing I try to tell people is, if you ever want to know the true story, go get it from the horse's mouth. That's the best way to get it. Is because, a lot of media tells, it makes it sound like, there was this bad blood between Gearbox and 3D Realms when, when you look between the lines, it doesn't actually sound like it was that bad of a deal when it came to Duke Nukem.
I also think it's because when you end up in a legal dispute, a lot of people, especially in the industry, like the games industry and any artistic entertainment industry, everyone always have to personify legal issues as if it's a personal issue between the two heads of studios. Like, it could be Randy and me, or Randy and Scott, or whoever. In reality, it's an issue between two businesses that has to be resolved. And once it's resolved, there's no bad blood, because it is, like, truth be told, and it might be harsh for some to hear, but we are all doing this as our full-time jobs, and our main goal here is to run a business.
Oh yeah, and that's how it is.
We know that, and if there's a good business proposition, we will take it, and Gearbox will take it too, and that's just how it is. It doesn't matter how many lawsuits you've been in the past. The lawsuits, especially in industries like these, appear solely based on different interpretations of for instance, rights. And those simply have to be resolved. You have to figure out, okay, who's on the right side here? And the only way to resolve that is, well, we have to take it through court, because you guys think you're right, we think we're right, so we have to let the court decide.
Let them be a mediator. Basically is what it boils down to, is the court plays mediation. And see, that's the one thing.
Exactly.
Is I had friends going, oh my god, did you see what happened to 3D Realms? It's like, yeah, I saw what happened. But here's the insider information, is I'm friends with them, several of these people, and it doesn't sound as bad as it actually is. It's not that bad.
No, it's not, and it's, we talk quite often with Gearbox about different things, and we're working on a thing together that's going to be announced early next year that we think is super cool. And we actually have some people right now beta testing it from our Discord channel. We invited some Duke fans in to beta test it, of course. It's a small collaboration, but it's a good step in the right direction. It's something really cool we wanted to do for a long time. But it
one
just shows that
one of those
there's
that
a good.
it's going to surprise a lot of people when it actually happens.
Oh, excuse me.
I say it's one of those. It'll definitely surprise people once it happens.
I think so. Yeah.
And see, that's what I was telling people. You know, one thing about games journalism. And this goes to the whole. I'm going to touch on a very such touchy subject. Is a lot of people Gamergate, that whole ordeal. You know, when you look at the original cause, the transparency in journalism, that was one of the big things. Is you know, even now, I think a lot of ways as a journalist, I'm even going to say transparency hasn't been there a lot. You know, it's what can get us the most clicks, and you know, people make this whole Gearbox thing sound a lot worse than what it was, like I said, and it comes out, you know, it's really not that bad. It's like you said, you know, it was just, we think we're right, they think they're right, so please help us.
Exactly.
And, you know, in a lot of ways, these, you know, when you go to a game convention like QuakeCon, for example, you then realize, hey, these guys aren't mad at each other. It was simply business is business. We're still friends at the end of the day. And now that things are resolved, we can move forward and do the projects together.
Yeah.
And that's
also
how...
the issue of personifying a studio. Gearbox, a couple of hundred people there. And
oh, yeah.
If you link all these people to one person, like, we're friends with a lot of guys at Gearbox and vice versa. It's, you know, the studio is comprised of all of this talent that works there. And they have nothing to do with with whatever dispute there is, legal dispute. And again, legal dispute is just there because you have to figure out who is right and wrong. And once you figure that out, everything is good again. You know, we are the first to admit if we made a mistake. And like, for instance, with Duke Mass Destruction, the mistake we made was not, hey, let's actually get in touch with Gearbox and make sure that they will not cause us any trouble, because they interpreted this agreement in a different way than our attorneys did. If we had done that, we could have avoided this, and then they chose another path. Looking in hindsight, we've learned a lot from this process, and I think they have too. Like, we have such a long-standing relationship. Well, Three Realms have with Randy, obviously, but also me personally and Randy have a long-standing relationship going back to 2010, when I was first talking with Randy, and I actually visited them in 2011 to show them Duke Reloaded behind closed doors, and since then, you know, we've been talking every now and then. We have a great relationship.
And Randy's you know, I've never met the guy personally, but you know, when I think about Randy, you know, all I hear is great things about the guy. I hear nothing but good things about him. You know, he's just super chill, super laid back, and I tell a lot of people, like, you know, even as a journalist, I fanboy. Like, when I first met you and the team at 3D Realms, I was like a 10-year-old standing in a candy shop looking at the biggest teddy bear I had ever seen in my life, and it's just like, oh my god, do you know who that is? Do you know who that is? You know, when I met the entire team, it was finally like, oh my god, you know. And even now, it's still that a lot of people don't realize, you know, when it comes to the games industry, once you really get to know the people, you realize there's not a whole lot of difference in the personalities.
They're just people who are passionate, like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it boils down to. Like, people who are so passionate about an industry that they can't help themselves. And I think another big mistake people often make when talking about Gearbox, and especially hating on Gearbox, is that every studio makes some mistakes. But
oh yeah,
if you look at all the great things that Gearbox have done, if you look back at the legacy of the studio, if you look back at everything from Half-Life, Opposing Force, Blue Shift, you look back to the old, you know, Duke 3D days in terms of Randy, if you look back to, you know, Brothers in Arms, Borderlands 2, it's been one success after another and one incredible game after another. And then you make a less successful game and everyone gives you all the shit about it. And I understand how that can be frustrating.
Oh yeah, it's like...
but looking at the big picture, Gearbox are incredibly talented at what they do. We've made so many mistakes ourselves, like, really, and let's say we just stopped at Bombshell. People were looking at Bombshell and saying, "Oh, that's not a good game. Fuck 3D Realms." Out comes Red Rogers. Oh, that's a cool game. We love 3D Realms now, and everyone forgets about Bombshell. Then Iron Maiden comes out. Oh, that's super cool. Everyone forgets about Red Rogers. Like every time a new good game comes out, everyone is going to be the first to praise the studio. Every time a shitty game comes out, everyone's going to be the first to talk shit about the studio, and it's always going to be like that. Like if you look at Blizzard now.
I was gonna say the Diablo thing,
yeah.
the Diablo deal. It's
now everyone, at least the most, I won't call them the hardcore, but the most passionate Blizzard fans, they hate Blizzard because of Diablo Immortal. It killed Blizzard. Killed how? You have 25 years of some of the most incredible games ever made. How can one mobile game announcement destroy all of that?
It's like
everyone makes missteps now and then.
Oh yeah, it's like, I've told people, I actually wrote I don't know if you've read it, I'll have to link it to you after the interview. I think you would actually have a read. I know it's late there, so it's like, this is like a 10-minute read. But, I actually point out that, a lot of people, a lot of us gamers get this mindset of we're entitled to this, we're entitled to that, we bought your stuff, so you have to make this game that we want. And I can tell people, one of the big things, I did call the industry, a lot of us gamers, the diehard, because I'm a diehard Diablo fan. I will tell people to this day, I still play Diablo 2 with Windows 10 in I think it's like 640p. So, I'm still playing on that old screen with the frame rate issues. At the end of the day, at first I was kind of upset, I wanted to be mad at Wyatt Chang for the announcement and all this. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, it's business. What is best for business? And if you want to see your studio stay afloat, they have to evolve with time. Studios have to either follow the trend or break the trend and create a new mold for them to go on for. And for you all, it definitely seemed Rad Rogers being reboot. The whole, Bombshell, all of that was your evolution. It was your way of going, hey, let's break the mold. We don't want to follow this hyper-realistic Call of Duty shooter path everybody's taking. It's like right now, it's, I have a piece coming out called Quit Taking the Battle Classic Retro-Style Shooters. You have Hellbound coming out. I don't know if you've read anything about that, but it looks super cool.
Yeah, I know.
It looks really, really cool. But, it's a lot of studios are going back to their roots because of following the mold for so long that it's, hey, we're chasing the money and it's no longer working. And it definitely feels like Iron Maiden was the step to go, hey, we need to go back to what we did and found success with and be ourselves again. Not saying 3D
Absolutely.
Realms has done a bad job at being themselves, Bombshell, it's like I say, Bombshell is very much a Duke Nukem style game. It's just third person. It's a twin stick action shooter. If Duke Nukem was down this route, I'm pretty sure Duke Nukem would have been appraised. But it was the idea that I think a lot of people didn't realize that Bombshell, Shelly, is, she's the Duchess of 3D Realms. I mean, she's kind of like I said earlier, when I think 3D Realms, I think Shelly Bombshell Harrison.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. And, I think it's going to be one of those things that's really going to work in the end. And it definitely seems to be doing so with all the positive attention she's getting with her upcoming title next year.
And absolutely. And I hope that when people play the full version of Iron Maiden, they will understand what we were trying to do. I think there's still some people, when they play the preview campaign, they get an idea of what Iron Maiden is. But the preview campaign is still, it's a few levels comprised of parts of the full game put together to create this unique preview campaign. And the full game is so much more than what you get to play in the preview campaign. Like, you have no idea. And I think people are going to be really pleasantly surprised when they get to experience the actual game, the actual storyline. So yeah, I'm extremely excited about it, and this new path, this new path works really well for us because it allows us to work on the games that we always wanted to play, um, and it's rare you get a chance to do that, because usually, if you just go 10 years back, and you were thinking about the good old days of Doom and Duke Nukem 3, it would not be possible to make a game that would fit in with that timeline because no one would play it. Why would anyone play an old game? It's already done. People want the new shit. They want Call of Duty, and they don't want an old game. But now the market is so saturated with modern shooters that you can actually make an old game, and you can make a game that fits in with the timeline. Like, Iron Maiden is 96, 97-ish. The new game we're making is 97, 98, 98-ish. And you can just pop it in there in the timeline and act like, the game came out, in the mid-90s.
Oh, yeah, and it works.
Yeah, and it works. You are making a part of history today as if you were part of history back then. And that is so unique and so much fun to do.
And that's the amazing thing is, go on Twitch, and you look at people playing these games. It's like I tell a lot of people, we're going to draw the big comparison because anybody that knows me knows I'm a fan of retro, but also I play a lot of Warframe. That's one of my go-to stream games.
Warframe is a fantastic game. Like, Digital Extremes have done an incredible job. It's probably one of the best comebacks in the industry ever.
And a lot of people don't realize
10 years now or something?
Yeah.
Almost 10 years?
And a lot of people don't realize, just like 3D Realms, Digital Extremes is not a new studio by any means. They've been around for... They've been around, God, what was it? I think, I want to say they came out in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, they made the first Unreal.
Yeah, and then, actually, they've been around since then. They made Epic Pinball back in 93. I used to play it. I remember... because they also did Unreal Gold and a couple things, and a lot of people don't realize Digital Extremes, like 3D Realms, went through some really hard times. They made multiple missteps. They tried their hardest to stay with what people knew, and then, here we go. And, this is kind of like the Iron Maiden thing for you all. It's, what can we do that we're known for? They took the best elements of Unreal Tournament. I'm going to say it right now. I tell people... there's a way I compare Warframe when explaining to somebody new. It's just like Iron Maiden, and I will do both, and you're gonna go, "Oh, yep, that's right." Mm-hmm. Warframe is essentially the best elements of Ninja Gaiden, Unreal Tournament, and Diablo slammed into one single game. I tell people that is the way you have to look at it, because you got the Diablo RPG aspect of leveling your Warframe. You have the element of grinding out these materials to craft your items, just like in Diablo. With Diablo 3, you had to craft items by farming materials, farming armor sets to get the materials. And then, when you look at, let's go to this whole Iron Maiden deal now, Iron Maiden is everything I loved about Bombshell. The all the nicknames for her weapons, her one-liner quips, which you can, pull that all from Duke Nukem, and he was, Duke was known for that. He is the king of one-liners, or the Duke of one-liners, and now you have the Duchess of one-liners on the other hand. So you have Duke and what you could consider his spiritual successor. The lady he could have married, type thing. His partner, and it's the same type of thing where if you look at 3D Realms, you guys are kind of going down your Digital Extremes path of, hey, let's do this. This is what we're known for. Let's do this. And let's do really good at it. And it's working. It's one of those, Iron Maiden has fans around the world. Duke Nukem has fans around the world. And if you look at Steam, I believe Iron Maiden right now is at a 10 out of 10 currently.
Oh, it's like the average, if you, if you look at Google, it's 10 out of 10 because it's above 96% or 95%. It's pretty
that's
insane.
736 reviews. I actually had to pull up Steam. I had to tab out a Bombshell. And that's the one thing that's really interesting is, you look at Bombshell, which, personally I tell people I love Bombshell, but I went in, I told you this at QuakeCon years ago, that to me it wasn't Diablo. it was something. It was Duke Nukem third person top down with a female protagonist. And, you know, I was one of those people that praised it for that, and I'm sitting here going, you know, I told you before, hey, I would really like the controller scheme. You know, controllers were eventually completely added and fixed with the targeting issues. You know, that was like a hot fix. You know, right after I talked to you, there was a hot fix. Boom, done, fixed. And, you know, when you look at the evolution, you know, when I think of Bombshell, you know, I'm sitting here going, okay, if you like Renner, you're going to like Bombshell. If you like Duke Nukem plus Renner, you're going to like Bombshell. You like Alien Nation plus Duke Nukem, you're going to like Bombshell. And it's because of that.
Yeah, hell, even Jim Sterling liked Bombshell.
Oh yeah, Jim Sterling. I'm going to be honest. I watch Jim Sterling quite often, and a lot of people don't realize this. As much of his, and I'm going to say it in probably the foulest way I can say it, he can be an overgrown douche. I mean, he can be a straight up dick. But here's the thing: if Jim Sterling appraises you, you've done something right. I'm actually trying to find that video to link it. It just started playing Jim's latest video.
Yeah, I all of the stuff Jim Sterling does. Sometimes I think he's right. Sometimes I just watch it because he is hilarious.
Folks, I am gonna drop this, and Romaine actually has a good point. Digital Extremes was around before that, and I actually had to correct myself there because I forgot they were around in the 90s.
Yeah.
Mateo does have a question for you. He said, if you can't sustain an IP or an entire company without BS like that, why do you think you're worthy of being in the industry? And he's not asking, you know, if you guys are doing that kind of thing.
Talking about Diablo Immortal.
Yeah, that's going back to the Diablo Immortal thing. What would your response be to that question?
I think a lot of people in general have time realizing how a company, a publicly traded company like Activision Blizzard actually works, because you're working in the entertainment industry, and your core demographic, which are the hardcore gamers who are extremely passionate about all you do, they see you in a specific way. They think, oh, Blizzard is, you know, here's the studio. They have a tough, incredibly talented developers. They did all these incredible games. They know exactly what they're doing. Bam, now they're doing this. What the F? Like, how could they even conceive of a Diablo mobile game? What is going on? But I think the last time I saw was like almost 10,000 employees or something insane they have. It's a publicly traded company, which means they have shareholders, they have board meetings, they have to run the company in a specific way and reach some specific stock measuring goals that are not specifically related to any games in order to sustain the company. And when you're the size of Activision Blizzard, you're not in the games industry anymore. You're in like the vast entertainment industry, and a small little part of that is, sure, you have to make great games, but a huge part of it is you need to please your shareholders, because you want to make sure that you do. So, for instance, the only way shareholders and the board in a huge company like this can do forecasts is to look at trends. And if they look at a trend that says, oh, you know, something like 99% of all revenue in the games industry last year was from mobile, they are going to tell you, you know what, you need to do a mobile thing. They don't really care about games or what games are and if it's good or not. They only care about, that's where we need to go because that's where the money is. And if you don't go that way, the stock is going to go down and everyone is going to lose money. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it's like, you know, on that note, you know, you look at Blizzard, they took I think it was $3.7 billion loss right after that announcement. And, you know, I tell a lot of people, here's the really tricky part about the industry. You know, as a streamer and a content creator, I know it's a much different deal, but, you know, when we look at your games, especially since I do a lot of playtesting, so I'm going to look at it from a developer standpoint, you know, with being a alpha tester a lot of the time, you essentially are a Q&A-er. You know, you're playing the game in its raw state. You're purposely breaking. You're purposely looking at the worst-case scenario of a game. as it's going through development. And the one thing a lot of people don't realize from that standpoint, and, I'm going to say it from the Q&A as a tester, from the sense of all the I have tests I've done I can't talk about at all. Like, I could get in a lot of trouble and get my channel shut down doing this. But what a lot of people don't realize from the developer standpoint is when you take a game, let's take Iron Maiden, for example, since I play tested that for, I think it was, 2 months before you guys announced it that we were play testing. It was a good chunk while because I remember seeing it on your wall and then applying for the tests. A lot of people don't realize from that standpoint of testing and Q&A is even testers feel that heat when people go, I hate this game. You were horrible for announcing this. You just need to stop. We don't like what you're doing. But a lot of people don't realize those testers also are giving critical feedback. And behind the scenes, you have these testers going, hey, this is what we like. This is what you need to fix. Change this. You'll have fans. You leave it here, you're going to kill your game. And it's like Iron Maiden, it was like earlier, it was mentioned by Richard that you guys have actually had to change the game procedurally. And, when I think about, the game back then and now, there's quite a few significant changes that have been made to Iron Maiden to improve the experience. And even in some ways, it changed the overall game itself. The glass being quite different instead of just broken everywhere, in that office building. I remember it being a train wreck at one point, and now it's the signs of a struggle, not a decimated building.
Yeah.
And
but I think, Dustin, when you're working with a studio that is comprised primarily of fans of this type of game, like every single person working on Iron Maiden are a fan of Duke Nukem 3D and our community build engine people. They're either build engine modders or build engine Duke Nukem 3D level designers. They all come from the same place as you. And the good thing about that is whenever you, as a playtester, gives critical feedback, they take that feedback to heart because you're no longer a playtester that gives feedback to a developer. You are a gamer that gives feedback to another gamer, and usually you're on the same side, and it makes it much easier for the developers to understand exactly what you mean. One of the most dangerous things you can do in game development is to take pride in your own product. It is so extremely dangerous, and it's also hard for sometimes for playtesters. I remember when we did playtesting for Bombshell almost a year in advance of the release, and one of the main things we told everyone when they signed the NDAs, and those were actually on location playtest, was that we need them to be brutally honest. And even if you say, I'll be brutally honest, just the fact that you're there and you're being paid and you get free pizza and everyone is having such a good time and you get to play a game a year in advance, even that whole setting makes you subconsciously praise the game a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Like the feedback you'll give will never be as harsh as someone who doesn't care about your game at all, someone who's completely objective. So even there, it's a problem. It's almost the same. It's the same tactic that a company like EA uses whenever they reviews. They fly out a bunch of journalists to the location. They pay for fancy hotels and flights and massages and everything.
One day I'll be one of those, I hope.
You get to sit down, you get to play the game, and you get all this amazing swag. Maybe you get a console for you and your wife with special branding. Get all these things, and then you're told that, oh yeah, just give us your honest opinion. There's not a big chance that if the game is even remotely good, you're going to give it a very high review, even if you try to convince yourself that I'm not going to let any of all this affect me.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool and all if you want someone to review your game. But if you want someone to playtest your game, you want the opposite effect. You don't want them to say all these nice things about your game because it's not going to help you in any way. You want them to say all the bad things about your game so you can actually improve it. So it kind of have the opposite effect there.
Yeah, it's... I tell people, one of the big things, this goes to that whole thing with Blizzard. I actually, I was one of the people who, I will openly admit, I admitted in my article, I was a giant man baby over it. I was doing the full-blown, oh my god, what the hell have you done with my series? I effing hate you. And then, after the disgruntlement alleviated, it's like, hey, I could get behind this because, at the end of the day, they're not going to kill their series. They're going to keep Diablo what it is. They're going to do what they think isn't just to please their shareholders, but their fans. They know the mobile market's evolving. They know that a lot of gamers are going mobile. And, it's like the big comparison here is Iron Maiden, I think will do probably, I think its best sells will be among the PC and the Switch crowd. Because gamers want to be able to mobile. PS4, I'm not going to say it's not going to do great, but I think the biggest sells, in my prediction, this is live, and I'll even have it in a write-up in the later, because, people who didn't get to tune in, there will be a written, it's not going to be this full-blown interview and conversation. It'll be kind of a dumbed-down version of it. A lot of people don't realize mobile is the way the games are trending. Look at Sony, even Kodera has already said they have interest in a possible handheld in the future. The Vita didn't do great. Andrew House, I personally blame Andrew House for part of it for bad marketing. But, the 3DS was already dominating the mobile market, and now the Switch is absolutely dominating it. And you're seeing mobile developers and PC developers going, hey, how about the Switch? Big example
but
here.
You're also putting Switch into the category. Not a lot of people do that. And I think that's the big difference here. A lot of core gamers don't consider the Switch mobile. They consider it a console.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it is the core gamer's mobile device. The core gamer's mobile device is the Switch, and that's why it's getting so much love. Because you get all the benefits from mobile, but you get all the benefits from a core gamer.
For sure.
The games coming out for the Switch are not dumped down, or not even dumbed down, but completely new mobile versions of existing franchises. You do actually get the full Doom 2016, or Skyrim, and Wolfenstein 2. You get the full experience, no compromises, on a Switch. And I think that is what the crowd likes. Like, there's no free-to-play, there's no loot crates. It's just, here's games on cartridges, full price, stick them in your Switch and play them on the go.
Oh, yeah,
that is what the core crowd want from a mobile device, basically.
And, a lot of people don't realize, this goes to that whole mobile. Let's take, and I'm going to do this in contrast because this game is relatable to Iron Maiden and film. Look at what Austria and the New Blood guys are doing. They're taking two PC-focused games. They're not even mentioning PS4 and Xbox One. They're going Switch.
Yeah, they're going only Switch. That's what we started with Iron Maiden. Like, even before we announced any other versions, we started behind the scenes planning for just the Switch version. Our goal was PC, Switch, but we wanted to bring it out on all platforms at once. We got a partner on board that could help us make that possible, but still, the Switch is also, from our perspective, we're not neglecting, Xbox and PlayStation, but the Switch version will be the first version we develop in-house, and then we branch out from that. Mainly because we know that the core, well, there's two things. The core demographic for a game like this on console, where the competition is not huge, is most likely Switch.
Oh yeah, you're not going to be, you're not going to be fighting Doom Eternal. You're not going to be fighting
exactly
the new Wolfenstein, Cyberpilot, and Youngbloods. You're not going to be fighting Battlefield and all this. And
exactly.
And now you don't have to worry about, it's like PUBG. I guess I was reading the other night. Even though I do journalism, I'm also a content creator, which means I don't have time to go through all the news. Hundreds of emails a day, hundreds of notifications from Games Press. But a lot of people don't realize the game industry is very, very heavily focused. Romain here, he says a great thing. People dislike mobile games not because they're simple, but because of the business models, because mobile games are very powerful now and can support really good games. And I'm going to make a great reference here. A lot of people don't realize the mobile game market is moving in a direction none of us would have expected. And a lot of it is, and I'm going to say it right now, it's not because of iOS and Android. Nintendo has shown the potential of mobile games. And that's
the
why
potential of premium games, at least.
exactly.
Because mobile started with premium games. It started with premium games, and then the premium games became like cheaper and cheaper, less expensive, and then at some point, some games started becoming free to play, and then you needed monetization in-app purchases, you needed loot crates, and so on and so on. And yeah, Nintendo is, since the business model for games on the Switch are very, and I don't think it's intended from Nintendo's side. Nintendo are just very old-fashioned in a lot of ways, especially looking at their online platforms. But I think it's simply just because of Nintendo's old-fashionedness that they still have, here's a $60 game on a cartridge. That's how you get it. The latest innovation from Nintendo is that, you can now get a digital version of it. So I think just because of that stubbornness, they have again shown and proved that premium games, like full-priced premium games on a handheld device, can work again, and there's actually a crowd that wants to buy them. Bam! Then you have the Elder Scrolls Blades, and now you have Diablo Immortal. All of a sudden, you get all of these, big-budget, AAA-ish games on mobile that are not, like the previous Gameloft rip-offs of Call of Duty and, what were they called, Modern Combat and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, you go into the mobile market. Oh, there's some games that you just want to shake your head at.
Yeah.
But the real potential is there, and a lot of people don't realize developers are starting to look at that potential, not because of necessarily, let's say, I give EA a lot of flack. In a lot of ways, I give them flack because I love EA. I'm the same way with id Software. If they made a misstep, I'd be like, hey, I love you guys, but I've said time and time again with Quake Champions, the reason I praise its loot boxes is it's purely cosmetic, and you can earn everything. It's not you can't earn it; it's locked away. It's you earn it. If you don't want to pay, you earn it.
But it's also like the loot boxes cover such a wide array of different types of products, and it's hard to even compare some of them. And the problem is they all share the same name, loot box, and that name by itself has become
a stigma.
A bad word. Yeah, so if you have a crate in a game you can open that gives you a hat, it's a loot box. But this scam, a gambling scheme in FIFA is also called a loot box. What is what? Like that's the whole problem with it.
Yeah, it's given the mobile market a bad name, and I start talking about with people. They're like, oh, I don't like microtransactions. I'm like, okay, so you like Warframe, but you don't like microtransactions, then why do you play Warframe? It's that same concept where everybody's got this bad stigma around the word loot box. It's like, some of my favorite games have loot boxes. They have microtransactions, but, that's what I like about the Switch is, even though the Switch is mobile at its core, you're still bringing in core developers like...
It's a mobile processor. That's the crazy thing. It's running on NVIDIA Tech rides. Well, it's like an Android phone.
Yeah, and you look at... So this is why I'm saying, the big thing is a lot of people don't realize the mobile market isn't necessarily bad, and this is why I've been saying time and time again, Iron Maiden, I think its biggest successes will be mobile through the Switch and PC. And developers are, the fans, this goes to that backlash, and, I know we've gone full circle again regarding the question that was asked, even though it was more of a hypothetical, or not so much a hypothetical as much as it was I know the word I want to use here, but rhetorical. It was a rhetorical question. Is the mobile market is starting to boom a lot because of the fact that players want games that are easily accessible. It's all about the accessibility. And, the big thing is, like, I will openly admit, Iron Maiden Switch, that'll probably be my go-to purchase. I love PC, but, when I'm not streaming, I'm not creating content, I take my Switch, I go to the cafe, or I will sit outside on the, in front of the fire pit playing games. I mean, that's just my deal is, I'm a content creator, I'm a journalist, but, I'm also a tester, and to me, it's one of those, a lot of people don't realize, after you make so much on the one platform versus another, it's, how can we, if I was a developer and I was in your shoes, for example, it's, I have some really great franchises. How can I broaden our business? And as a gamer, what would I want to do to broaden my horizon? You know, I as a streamer and a content creator, you know, I'm a bunch of things. I'm a jack of all trades when it comes to gaming. I'm a tester, I'm a streamer, I'm a content creator, I'm a journalist, and an influencer, I guess you could say, through streaming. It was, how can you, I've had people go, why'd you go to Facebook? This is the example is, why'd you go to Facebook from Twitch? You're doing great on Twitch and YouTube. I'm doing better here because this platform is more suited to my needs. You know, it's going to be the same with Bombshell. It's, hey, we have this really awesome shooter. It's going to work great with a controller. It can be taken on the go. It's not going to be super demanding on the NVIDIA chip in it. We already know how to code for the API, so we're doing this. You know, it's that same idea a lot of people overlook is the evolution of games is leading towards a mobile market, a PC and mobile market. And that's why I was like, when you guys announced the Switch version of I Am Maiden, I was like, there's my day one purchase right there. I love the PC version, but oh my god, would I love to be able to sit on my couch, just put on my headset, have, you know, my TV or something running in the background, and just blast away on I Am Maiden.
But isn't it fun that, like, since the early mid, people have always had this dream of taking core PC games and bringing them with them on the go, and they've never had that chance. Sure, you have laptops and so on, but they're not really to the same degree. And then you've had different types of handhelds that kind of could do something like it, like you had 3DS or something like the GBA. You had Doom or a weird version of Doom in 3D, but you've never truly been able to take full PC games, bring them with you on a handheld device that is both power efficient, powerful, and something that's lightweight.
Oh yeah,
the Switch is really the first time ever where you can actually do that, and that is so appealing because now, like, that one of the reasons you see everyone wanting their favorite PC game or console game on the Switch is because finally you can actually take that game with you on the go, which you've never been able to in its fullest. You can do, you know, some types of mobile spin-off type games of some of them and so on, but they're all these downgraded versions or remade versions of the game that doesn't really fit or feel good, and that's what this Switch does differently.
And you know,
so I agree with you. I want it on Switch just as much as the other person.
Well, it's like I tell people, you know, a lot of people go, "Why do you stream on PS4?" When I stream on PS4, because, you know, until I get to that point where it's, hey, you either take partner or you stay affiliate. You know, a lot of people don't realize that's one way streaming works is when you dedicate to a platform, for example, it's you either fully dedicate or you don't do it at all. And, you know, it's like if I get offered a partner here, for example, I would probably end up just ditching my Twitch altogether. But it's the same idea of what can evolve and make it better. And, you know, a lot of people don't realize the evolution of games is happening right before our eyes. You know, we are sitting here with this classic mindset of, oh, PC games were meant for PC, consoles shouldn't have them. You know, you still have the console peasant, quote-unquote, PC master race war going.
Isn't it funny how the console peasant doesn't really apply to Switch? It
doesn't.
It's so weird.
And, you know, so at QuakeCon, I got a funny story for everybody. So at QuakeCon 2018, down in Dallas, met with a few of my friends who, I'm going to leave them unnamed. They do work at some of the Bethesda studios, again, leaving studios even unnamed out of respect for the developers. You know, Frederik, everybody knows now, he's one of my friends. I do talk to him here and there. I don't get to talk as much because the time difference is killer. 7 hours during the winter, 8 in the summer, I believe.
Yeah.
And so one of the funny things is sitting here trying to get ready for the Fallout 76 showcase. I'm sitting there. I had a guy lean over going, "What are you doing?" And I'm just like, "What do you mean, what am I doing?" He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm sitting there playing Doom on my Switch going, "I'm playing Doom." He's like, "Why are you on a computer doing that?" It's like, why would I want to go, you know, down the BYOC with a computer when I'm playing the exact same game? Granted, the graphics aren't a deal, but I go into that mindset as a gamer of, I don't care about graphics. If it plays great, feels great, it offers an experience that I enjoy, graphics are out the window. Graphics
the
are
screen is also so small. Like that's another thing. People expect that you should have the same graphics on the Switch like in ratio 1-to-1. But the problem is the screen is so small, you're so far away from it when you're sitting in a normal position that you hardly notice any difference. Like really, you hardly notice any difference.
And see, I don't even notice it. For example, I'm going to fully admit my guilt. I am a fan of Fortnite Battle Royale. I love it. It's great. It's fun. But what a lot of people don't realize is the reason I like it is not because of the PC. I don't care for the PC and PS4 or Xbox One versions. I like it on the Switch because I can sit down on my couch. I could I'm a big mama's boy and daddy's boy. I love spending time with my parents. That's the one thing I love about my career path is my family is number one to me.
Yeah.
So having that ability is great. It's like, when Iron Maiden releases, I'm working on the review. There's a good chance, it's going to be on the Switch. Not because I don't like the PC version, but because the Switch version is going to be almost identical. I can boot up the PC version. I'm pretty sure at launch I'll be able to plug in my Xbox One controller and play it just like I would on the Switch.
Yeah, it also allows you to play it in more places and play it for longer. Like whenever you do reviews, and as long as good impression as possible on the game, and by bringing the Switch alongside of you, whenever you get the urge to, I just want to play another mission in Iron Maiden, you can just do it right off the bat rather than having to plan for it and sit and play it in longer stretches. So
yeah,
it's a win-win for everyone afterwards.
Well, it's like a lot of people don't realize. So as a reviewer, as a critic, I may not be well known as some of the guys over at Game Informer, IG, and none of that. Which I'm fine with that. That's fine. The way I look at it is one day I'll be that guy. I became a journalist because of my aspirations of wanting to be one from people like Andrew Reiner, Adam Sessler, Morgan Webb. These big name reviewers were the reason I even started. And a lot of people realize the amount of time developers spend on games, but also the amount of time critics spend on games. It's like, we get games, even streamers get games a week or two early sometimes. But they don't realize for those week or two that we're dedicating to that time, that's the only thing we're really having a chance to do. So there's days where I will spend, for example, when the preview, I'm working on my preview for Iron Maiden, for example, and it's actually talking about Iron Maiden in its fullest. That's weeks in the making. Yeah, my deal says 4 hours played, but that doesn't take in consideration on that Steam account the time I've spent on another Steam account through being able to share. I have my press account that I shared it to because I accidentally redeemed it on the wrong code, to be completely honest. But, when you look at that, it's just like developers, we all live and eat these games for a living. That's our livelihood. And so the idea of Switch and mobility is, hey, I can play this game. I'm probably going to play it 2 or 3 hours here because my back can't take it. Like, right now, I'm sitting on a bench. Literally, I have no back support. And so, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 hours on this game a day where, say, Red Dead Redemption, for example, I spent, I'm getting ready to review it, I spent about 100 hours in it in 3 weeks. I spent over 100 hours on a single game just to beat it so I could review it. And, that's the kind of dedication.
That's the crazy, like, with the Switch, you can now never get time off. You can work anywhere all the time.
Oh, yeah. It's like, that's the one thing a lot of people don't realize about the mobile market. This goes back to the Diablo thing, is Diablo is looking at the same, the Diablo team's looking at it from the same aspect. What can we do until we announce Diablo 4 and make it widely accessible? And their answer was Diablo Mobile, Diablo Immortal. And the idea of, oh, hey, we really don't want this is happened, but it's like, okay, so what if they announce the Switch version? Would they still have the same backlash? One of the big things, you look at Iron Maiden, for example, and when you guys revealed the Switch version, it's like, everybody's sitting there applauding it. It's because a lot of people aren't looking at it from the aspect of it. Yes, the Switch is a console, but when you look at how Nintendo developed it, they were thinking mobile market. Basically the Switch, I know a lot of people don't know this, but the Switch is actually a modified Shield K1 tablet and K2 tablet. Yeah. That's essentially what it is. It's just a Shield tablet with 2 controllers hooked up to the sides of it, and with Nintendo's OS, customized proprietary OS. And so it's a perfect fit for games like Iron Maiden and Rad Rogers and whatnot because of the accessibility. And that's where the evolution, I was talking about came in. And, Mateo said it very well as he doesn't care much for consoles, but he does see the Switch as a well-imagined idea. And that's where I think a lot of PC gamers are starting to look at the Switch is, hey, I'm getting the same experience, but, I'm on a handheld. And, again, that is the mobile market.
Yeah.
And, Mateo actually makes a good point. It's not the platform that's the problem, it's the way it's made. And, a lot of developers lose that vision of their series when migrating over to handheld or mobile.
Exactly.
But I know I've had you for a long time. This has actually been kind of a nice little reunion if you think about it, because we don't get to talk a lot.
Been a podcast, Dustin.
Oh yeah, I might as well have called this a podcast. I mean, this should have not been an interview. This is just a podcast. We're getting rid of the interview.
Podcast.
Yeah, there we go.
Joe Rogan link.
Oh yeah, I've beat him by, let's see, 2:33 is when we started. It's 5:02. Yeah, we beat him by about 2.5 hours.
Yeah. He did Darren Brown. Can't wait to see that. I love Darren Brown. He's just.
Oh yeah, I haven't listened to much of him. I believe it or not, the podcast I listen to, I think you know the guy too. I listen to a lot of Second Opinion Pro when he gets stuff up. Caleb and his team are folks. If you have not, please go check out Second Opinion Pro. A lot of love to my buddy Caleb and his team, and the guys at Cinelinks for helping him grow. So I know I've had you for a long time. To put it things shortly, I've had Fred here for quite a while, 2.5 hours, and I know you're pushing a little close. You're almost, midnight 1?
Oh, yeah, man.
But I know it's really late, folks, because of the time difference. I really want to give a huge shout out to all the gentlemen and folks at 3D Realms for tuning in. And Fred, I do have one last question for you. People who are expecting Bombshell definitive, since we've talked about, we know Iron Maiden's release date. Can we possibly expect any news about the definitive edition of Bombshell coming up anytime soon?
Yeah, it's it'll come out this Christmas.
Awesome. There you go, folks. Consoles. Is it going to be a PC thing, or is consoles...
You just said one question. You could just add more questions.
Yeah, I probably should have made it a bigger question, but... So the final question before we do our departure is console versions.
So we had a external studio work on a console back in 2016, and when we kind of shifted direction, all of that was kind of put on hold. Our plan was to first completely fix the PC version and do all the tweaks and changes we wanted. That's the definitive edition. Depending on how well that does, it might or might not make sense to do the console version, and we'll take a look at it once it's released.
There you go, folks. Bombshell Definitive Edition coming soon to you. Iron Maiden early next year for all platforms. So I'm not even going to list them all platforms. Just don't expect iOS and Android at this time.
Yeah.
Just remember Steam Link is
the two most popular.
Yeah. Just remember Steam Link is there, so you can play it on Steam Link.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, I want to give everybody who tuned in and 3D Realms, as well as Frederik Schreiber, for taking time from their day to be here for this now turned glorious podcast from 15-20 minute interview. But it has been so awesome catching up with you, Fred. It's been a long time since we've been able to sit down and talk. I mean, we really have not been able to in several years.
It's been so long, man. You're 2016. Are you coming to PAX South? San Antonio, not too far away, so.
Hey, folks. So about PAX South, that's actually something I was going to be bringing up in an article. Right now, if you would like to support our trip to PAX South, unfortunately, financially, that obligation has fell through. Some personal matters came up. Sure. If you want to support that, remember you can tip or donate through Facebook. If you do want to leave a tip or a donation, you can do it through PayPal. All you have to do is let us know. I can PM you the link or drop it in the deal. But stars are the big way here on Facebook for that. The plans are, if we have the money, yes, we would like to be there. We would love to meet you all and talk in person about the deal.
Some money so he can come play.
Yes, throw stars my direction so we can come down there and sit down with the guys at 3D Realms and definitely maybe do a live stream at the BYOC or something if they have one going.
Yeah, I don't think they have, but
hey, there's always a
But
laptop for that. We can always do a laptop.
But that's always someone having to land under a staircase somewhere.
Exactly. There you go. There's going to be somebody who knows with a big old laptop sitting on the staircase.
Yeah.
But again, folks, it is really late where Frederik is. I want to give a huge shout out to him again. Thank you so much, Fred, for
Thank you
taking
so much
your time.
for having me, man.
It's a pleasure. It's definitely, again, been a massive pleasure to talk to you. And hopefully we can do so again soon when the definitive edition of Bombshell launches. And definitely when Iron Maiden launches next year on the Switch.
Absolutely, anytime.
If you have not, folks, remember, Fred has already said they will be at PAX. So check them out there at their booth whenever the information goes live. We will have it on our site whenever the information becomes fully available. And if the chance is there, we will see you all there. Fred, again, thank you so much. And we'll definitely be in touch.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
And folks, we will be back here very briefly with a second part of our stream, so tune in for that. Here in about an hour, I am going to take some time to get some food. I completely skipped lunch. All right, Fred, thank you again. And folks, we'll be back here in a bit. That's it. Cool. We're done with this one.
Say hi to your father, by the way.
I will give him a big hi for you. I'm sure he's probably tuned in, so he's probably heard it. He just can't say it. But we will be back more with this. We will be revisiting Bombshell next Saturday at 4 o'clock Central Standard Time here in the U.S. We're going to be doing a full stream till 8 p.m. with that one. And then we're going to be revisiting Iron Maiden's preview campaign leading up to its release every other weekend, starting at 4 o'clock on Saturdays until we beat it, so probably an hour or two. And one of the weekend before release, whenever the official release date gets announced, we will be doing a full secret hunt to find all the secrets the day before launch. So we will spend the entire afternoon hunting down every secret in the preview campaign. So I hope to see you all there for that one. If you have not, go check out 3D Realms' Iron Maiden, now available, I believe, for pre-order on Steam. Is that correct?
Exactly.
So go check it out on Steam today and pre-order the game if you're interested in it. Right now, it is available. And we will be dropping that link momentarily, and we'll see you all back in about an hour.
Cool. All right. See you around.
See you around, friend. You have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
I will. Bye-bye.